Warden of Darkness. 1. The sky of the underworld is forever grey, and the thick clouds are like a cage, locking the light in the air. Warden Ashuruvian sat on a high platform, the bowl of beef stew in his hand exuded a warm aroma. His gaze cut through the fog and landed on the prisoner on the rack, Calder Stone, a former Imperial Admiral who was now a desperate prisoner. Is he still struggling? Ashu asked lightly. The waiter responded in a low voice, there is still breath, but it can't last long. Ashu nodded slightly, tapping the edge of the bowl with his fingers, as if considering the seasoning of dinner, and seemed to weigh the weight of fate. Calder's eyes were full of fear and unwillingness. He was once high, but he was like dust in front of the warden. The surrounding prisoners whispered, the rumored warden can heal the scars of spiritual power and reverse the destiny. Maybe he is not a human at all, but a demon incarnation. 2. The next day, prisoners from various districts gathered in Hell Square. Ashu walked slowly, every step with invisible coercion, as if the air was solidified. Today, who wants to challenge? His voice was low, like an ice blade cutting through the night. The young man who claimed to have been a noble duke shrank and raised his hand. I want to take on the challenge. Ashu smiled lightly, very good, your courage deserves a reward. The air suddenly shook, and a transparent barrier separated the shrinking duke, and he felt his power drain rapidly, like a tide receding. The prisoners stare with bated breath, not a simple deterrent, but the warden's power to control fate. 3. Late at night, deep in the underworld, Ash enters a forgotten room. Ancient game building drawings hang on the walls, and symbols shimmer with glow. It turns out that the predecessor of the dark prison was actually an escape game. He whispered. Fingers slid over the drawing, an array of light pulled him into the illusion. He appears in the infinite labyrinth, walls crawling with whispering vines, each seemingly transmitting the prisoner's prayers. Who? Is it a key? A low voice echoed. Ashu sneered, no, you are all wrong. I am the only one who knows the truth. 4. Deep in the labyrinth, Ash meets a Landcather, a lonely nobleman exiled by the Empire, with hair disheveled like a wolf. Are you the warden? Erlin asked suspiciously. Ashu nodded, his eyes cold. I'm not just the warden, I'm the turning point of your fate. Erlin tried to resist, and the ghostly sword appeared in his hand, but as soon as he got closer, the entire power was sucked away by Ashu and turned into air. You still don't understand, resisting is futile. Ashu's voice was soft but extremely terrifying. 5. On the other side, in Underworld 2, prisoners begin to challenge each other in an attempt to compete for presence in front of Ashu. I was once an imperial general, why do you? In my eyes, you are all just pawns. With the tap of Ashu's finger, the gravity of the entire area changed instantly, and the prisoners fell like puppets. At night, when Ashu was patrolling alone, he heard the prisoner whispering, Can you really control your destiny? He didn't answer, just looked at the starry sky, and a strange light flashed in his eyes. 6. In Dark Prison District 3, Marlena Ferrer, a female prisoner who was once the head of Imperial Intelligence, was healed by the warden of her mental power. She lay on the bed, feeling the power of the air flow in her hands, with a look of astonishment in her eyes. How can it be? Changing our essence? Ashu walked into the room and stroked her shoulder, and her hair became soft and cute when touched, as docile as a small beast. This is the rule and my gift. Ashu whispered. 7. In the trial court of the underworld, the former high-ranking dukes, generals, and mercenary leaders all knelt at Ashu's feet. Your pride, I will destroy it overnight. Ashu said indifferently. He stretched out his hand, and a trace of light and shadow flowed out of the palm of his hand, turning their spiritual power into a glimmer of light and sucking it into his palm. The prisoners held their breath and for the first time felt that the warden was not just a deterrent, but a complete control of fate. Tomorrow, I will give you a new challenge. Ashu's voice was low and distant, like a whisper from the abyss. 8. At dawn, the air in the dark Hell Square was extremely quiet. Ashu stood in the center, facing the prisoner's gaze, and said softly, Do you know why demons like to tease the world? For pleasure? Someone timidly replied. Ashu smiled, a glimmer of light flashed in his eyes. No, he likes to see you guys collapse yourself. At this moment, fear welled up in the hearts of the prisoners, and a glimmer of hope was aroused. This warden might be the only one who could turn their fate around. 9. Ashu walked to a forgotten cell with only a small beast-like stuffed creature with a chaotic soul. He reached out to touch it, and the little beast instantly turned into a ray of light, wrapped around his palm, and whispered faintly, Warden. We would like to follow you. Ashu chuckled, this was exactly his original plan, to get the prisoners to trust him and restore order. However, he secretly thought in his heart, can these plush Tianjia really accept their own manipulation? 10. At night, in the labyrinth of hell, Ashu walks alone, surrounded by countless phantoms, the former Imperial Pride, exiled warriors, and fallen magicians. Each phantom whispered, "You. Can you really control everything?" Ashu raised his hand, and the light in his palm flowed like a galaxy. "I don't just control everything, I want you to see it. What is a real collapse?" Step by step, he walked towards the abyss, and the abyss responded to his steps as if the world was waiting for his decision. 11. The prison tower in the fourth area of the dark hell was engulfed in by mist, and Ashu stepped in, the flickering runes around him whispering like living creatures. The prisoners retreated in horror, leaving only Sylvain Kane, a former Imperial magician, standing still, who wanted to challenge the warden's authority. "Your power." "Impossibility." Sylvain raised his staff, and the runic light flickered, but in Ash's eyes, this light was only like dust. Ashu stretched out his hand and gently retracted the light. "Is it possible? You don't even know your limits." 12. As night falls, Ashu strolls to the central square of the underworld. The prisoners gathered, and the air was filled with tension and anticipation. "Little Are You Wien, what are you going to do?" a mercenary leader asked, his eyes flashing with unwillingness. Ashu smiled, "Tonight, I want you to feel that fate is not in your control." In an instant, countless phantom Tianjiao appeared in the square, their images distorted and deformed, helpless like plush dolls. 13. At dawn, Ashu meets a mysterious prisoner in the labyrinth, an assassin who calls himself Flowing Shadow. His figure was like smoke, his steps were light but with a deadly threat. "You. Is it the warden?" Lu Ying asked in a low voice. Ashu nodded, and with a wave of his finger, he turned Flowing Shadow's attack into air. "You can try, but the result will not change." Lu Ying was stunned, and for the first time he felt the fear outside of power. 14. Deep in the underworld, Ash discovers a forgotten room filled with relics of the former Tianjiao. He caressed each item and smiled secretly. "These people who were once high will eventually collapse under my control. Today, I want to give you a choice." Ashu whispered, his voice piercing through the walls, echoing throughout the hell. 15. The prisoners began to discuss the warden's intentions privately. "Can he really control our essence?" Marlena asked in a low voice. "Maybe. We are destined to be just his dolls." Erlen responded, with a struggle in his eyes. Ashu listened from a distance, the corners of his mouth slightly raised. It was this fear and uneasiness that was the source of his strength. 16. In Dark Hell Area 5, Ashu used the ability of destiny reshaping for the first time. He temporarily restored the prisoners to their original form, but each person's nature was subtly altered. The once arrogant and domineering duke is now shy and docile, the once unruly mercenary became as soft as a plush creature. The prisoners couldn't believe their eyes, only Ashu smiled coldly. "This is just the beginning." 17. At the trial court, the prisoners faced Ashu's coercion and began to suspect each other. "Who can guarantee that the warden will not bite us back?" the former admiral whispered cared. "He is the warden, not our enemy." The duke shrank retorted, but with fear in his tone. Ashu quietly observed that this kind of psychological warfare made him more pleasurable than physical destruction. 18. In the labyrinth of the underworld, Ashu meets a group of fugitive prisoners who form a small resistance army. "You. It's the warden." the leader of the resistance shouted. Ashu smiled, "No, I am your test and your end." The prisoners were stunned, but they had to surrender to his existence. 19. At night, the sky of the underworld suddenly cracked with a silver light, reflecting the labyrinth into an illusion. Ashu stood under the crack, feeling the pulse of this force. "Demonic interference," he muttered, a hint of determination flashing in his eyes. This light reminded him that control is not just a means but also a limit that can be challenged at any time. 20. At dawn, Ashu gathers the prisoners and begins teaching them the technique of essential restructuring. "Your power can only be truly released under my guidance," Ashu said. The prisoners learn hard, but each change makes them more dependent on the warden. The shrinking duke whispered, "This. Is it freedom or slavery?" 21. In the depths of the prison, an abnormal fluctuation of spiritual power suddenly emerged. Ashu stood still, feeling the sea of consciousness of the prisoner in the distance rise and fall like water waves. "Someone wants to escape from prison," he said in a low voice. In an instant, the walls around the maze twisted and stretched, wrapping the prisoners trying to escape as if they were alive. "Try it." Ashu smiled faintly, his eyes piercing the night like cold stars. 22. Among the prisoners, Marlena Ferrer quietly conspired with Erlen Cather. "They want to use the loopholes in the maze to organize resistance. We can't rely on him all the time," Marlena whispered. Erlen nodded, "But we can't completely resist either." Ashu emerged from the shadows, as if he heard every thought in their hearts. "Your fear is my best ally." 23. In the central square of the underworld, Ashu demonstrated the power of time reversal for the first time. The prisoners see their past mistakes recur, and every struggle is relentlessly replayed. Selder knelt down, his voice trembling. I can't bear it. A cold light flashed in Ashu's eyes. This is the punishment you deserve, and it is also the starting point of rebirth. 24. At midnight, Ashu steps into the forbidden area at the deepest part of the maze. The space here curves and twists, and every step feels like stepping into a bottomless abyss. A voice sounded, "Warden, you will be alone after all." Ashu said indifferently, "Alone? No, my prisoners will follow me, even the plush Tianjiao will surrender." 25. In the second area of the underworld, the prisoners began to accept Ashu's guidance and learn to master the faint power of fate. "Can you feel the direction of the flow of power?" Ashu asked. The prisoners nodded, their grasp limited, but every change was as shocking as a rebirth. Ashu smiled, "Very good, your dependence will only make me stronger." 26. At dawn, the sky of the prison glowed with purple-red light. Ashu stood on a high platform, and a low roar came from the distance, which seemed to be the demon's dissatisfaction. "Today, I want you to see the real collapse." The prisoners hold their breath, waiting for the unknown trial. 27. In the third area of the underworld, Ashu used the fate manipulation technique to confuse the once proud and domineering dukes, generals, and mercenary leaders. They began to suspect each other, and conflicts arose. "How is that possible? I clearly control everything." Keld was hoarse. Ashu smiled lightly, "Mastery. You are just my pawns." 28. At midnight, the vines in the labyrinth suddenly come to life, entwining the prisoners' limbs and whispering their inner secrets. Marlena is entangled in vines, and she can't hold back her tears as she sees her past mistakes repeat itself. Ashu stood aside, tapped his fingers, and the vines instantly dissipated. "Only by admitting your own vulnerability can you grow." 29. At the entrance of the abyss of hell, Ash and Lu Ying walked in together. Lu Ying whispered, "Do you really want to control everything?" Ashu sneered, "No, I'm going to make them collapse and then reshape." The abyss responded to his determination, and countless lights and shadows appeared on the ground, like the souls of thousands of prisoners. 30. At dawn, the prisoners find that their powers are beginning to change, and the plush Tianjiao can understand each other's hearts. It seems to have really changed." The Duke was surprised. Ashu said indifferently, "You think this is a change, but it's actually just a side effect of your dependence on me." 31. In the dark square, Ashu allowed the prisoners to fight against each other for the first time. The once arrogant Admiral Kelder is forced to cooperate with his fellow plush to complete the mission. Every collaboration is a mental and strength grind, and they begin to understand what it means to be dependent. 32. At night, Ashu walked into a dark cell. The prisoners whispered, "Will he get out of control one day?" Ash smiled, "I never lose control, I just let you see the beauty of fear and hope." 33. In Area 5 of the dark prison, the prisoners began to have a weak sense of resistance, but Ash had already expected it. He manipulated space with a shimmer of light, causing every movement of the prisoner to be slightly altered, making it impossible to truly escape. "Your freedom exists only in the palm of my hand," Ashu whispered. 34. At midnight, Ashu walked alone in the depths of the labyrinth, the light and shadow distorting into the face of the past Tianjiao. He reached out and touched, feeling the deepest shame and fear in their hearts. "These are the results I want." He laughed lowly. 35. At dawn, the prisoners of Dark Prison District 4 began to spontaneously cooperate to form a micro-resistance organization. Ashu observed secretly and laughed secretly in his heart. They thought they could resist, but this is the test. The prisoners supported each other, and the plush Tianjiao began to show creativity and courage, but still couldn't escape Ashu's control. 36. The crack in the dark prison abyss reappeared, and the demonic aura approached. Ashu stood still, his eyes flashing, "Come on, I'll show you the real control." The demon roared, feeling the pressure of the challenge like never before. 37. In the center of the prison, Ashu performs spiritual reshaping, and the prisoner's consciousness is completely reconstructed. The plush Tianjiao gradually accepted their own changes, and their souls no longer struggled, but completely obeyed. Ashu smiled lightly, "This is your rebirth, and it is also my game." 38. As night fell, countless phantoms appeared in the maze, and the former Tianjiao turned into a plush form, being manipulated by Ash from beginning to end. The prisoners couldn't laugh or cry, but they couldn't resist. Ashu secretly rejoiced, "This is exactly the script that even the devil can't predict." 39. At dawn, in the second area of the dark hell, Marlena and Ellen are forced to face the deepest shadows in their hearts. Ashu reached out to caress them, and their fear instantly turned into a gentle force. Does it really control our destiny?" Marlena asked in a low voice. Ashu smiled, "No, I just put it in your hands and let you surrender voluntarily. 40. In Dark Prison Area 3, prisoners worked together as a team for the first time to complete the task. The plush Tianjiao cheered, and Ashu watched indifferently. Dependence and obedience are your strength, and they are also my rules of the game. 41. At midnight, the underworld maze twists again, and the location of passages and rooms is constantly changing. Ashu walked in it, feeling the space flow through his fingertips like a chessboard. The prisoners try to find an exit, but each path leads to an ending that Ashu has already arranged. 42. At dawn, Ashu gathers the prisoners and announces a new challenge, a test of the limits of mental and physical strength. The prisoners were nervous, but also full of anticipation. Ashu said lightly, only by experiencing collapse can we truly grow. 43. In the center of the prison, Ashu shows the limits of time and space manipulation. The prisoners see their past, present unfolding at the same time as their possible future. For the first time, Kalda felt weak, and his voice trembled. Nothing can be done. Ashu smiled, this is what you should be aware. 44. At night, whispers were heard from the labyrinth, and Ashu felt the demon's dissatisfaction. You actually controlling everything? A low voice sounded. Ashu was indifferent, not only do I control it, I also create new rules. 45. At dawn, the prisoners began to explore the maze spontaneously, but each action was slightly adjusted by Ashu. Are we really free? Marlena whispered. Ashu smiled, freedom is just the scope of what you are willing to admit. 46. In Area 5 of the Dark Prison, Ash began to let the prisoners challenge each other's minds. The plush heroes learned to cooperate and rely on laughter and tears. Ashu watched indifferently, true control is not fear but trust and obedience. 47. At midnight, the maze crack reappears, and the demonic aura approaches. Ashu stretched out his hand, and a light closed the crack, and the prisoners were all shocked when they witnessed this scene. Who said control is not absolute? Ashu whispered, his eyes flashing like a galaxy. 48. At dawn, the prisoners are forced to face their true nature again. Malena, Erlin, and the rest of the Celestial Pride gradually accept their plush identities and gain power from them. Ashu smiled, the more obedient you are, the more exciting my game will be. 49. In the center of the dark maze, Ashu stood still, surrounded by prisoners. Today, you will complete the final trial. The labyrinth space began to flip, and the prisoners felt unprecedented pressure and fear. But at the same time, they also felt the freedom and courage of their souls for the first time. 50. At midnight, the prison rift completely disappeared, and the demonic aura receded. The plush nature of the prisoners is completely stable, and trust and dependence turn into a unifying force. Ashu stood on the high platform, his eyes piercing the night. This is the final chapter of the Dark Prison Warden. The Tianjiao collapsed, were reborn, obeyed, cooperated, their souls were rewritten, and the rules of the world were overturned by Ashu. He smiled, the light in his hand flowed, and the hell returned to tranquility again.